Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by ICOM. Heard it? Worked it? Logged it. Visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information about ICOM radios.
It's Ham Radio with Neil Rapp. Here we go. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. Call in, let's talk. Neil's your guy. Ham Talk Live. Here we go on Ham Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. It's time for Ham Talk Live. It's episode number 148. Pico Ballooning, recorded live on Thursday, January 10th, 2019. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight we're joined by Bill Brown, WB8ELK, and we'll take your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week, Patrick Stoddard, WD9EWK, Endoff Buckley, N6UTC, and David Akins, N6HHR were here to talk about operations on the Queen Mary. If you missed the show, you can listen anytime at hamtalklive.com or on your favorite podcast app or YouTube. We also want to welcome our listeners on WTWW 5085 AM. Ham Talk Live rebroadcasts are now on WTWW shortwave on Saturday nights, along with several other ham radio programs. So thanks to Ted Randall and Holly for getting and his crew for adding us to the Saturday night ham radio show lineup. And we'll let you know exactly when the time is going to air. They're kind of juggling around some of the shows and some of the times. I think we were on at 7 o'clock Central last Saturday, and that was our first time on, and it just kind of happened. So I didn't have any warning. So we'll figure out the times and get those announced, but we will be on Saturday night, but we won't be live, so you won't be able to call in on WTWW, but we will have the rebroadcast available every week over there on 5085 AM. So that's new, and then also we've got a new phone system tonight. I've kind of been telling you that Skype was on borrowed time, and we finally lost the capability to merge calls on Monday on Skype. So we've got a new phone system in place, thanks to NN1C. That's Chicken with Fries' new fancy call sign. Marty, he got us hooked up with some real phone stuff. So we've been working on that all week, and so we just finished it up a few hours ago. So we're going to give it a try tonight. So we'll see how that goes, but we're kind of excited about some of the possibilities for people calling in. We'll have some more capabilities to do some things to make it a little better. So we'll see how that goes. But thanks to Marty for getting that ready to go, especially today when we were just trying to finish up the last little bit. So we've got it going. At least it worked in the test. So I do have to give you a new phone number to call tonight. Now, next week, we'll have everything back to the old phone number. We're going to move the phone number over to the new system. But tonight, you'll need to call a different number. So I'm going to give you that number right now. It's not time to call yet, but let me give you the new number. It's still area code 812, but the new number is 650-9556. That's 812-650-9556. We'll be using that tonight only, just until we get the new system all transferred over. But if you want to call in during the last segment of the show tonight and ask some questions, that's how you'll do it. Or you can tweet us. We're at Ham Talk Live on Twitter, and you can do that whenever you want, and I'll go over there and check that from time to time. So you can always get us over there on Twitter. So I'll be back with Bill right after this word from ICOM America, right here on Ham Talk Live. Attention all hams. ICOM knows that ham clubs play a big role in bringing ham communities together to learn from their peers and industry leaders. As a way to give back and help you on this mission, ICOM has launched a promotion exclusively for ham clubs and the ham fests they are involved with. By registering your club, you could win ICOM swag, a Skype presentation, or for your ham fest, an ICOM booth set up at your ham club. Register today for your chance to win. Enter today at www.icomamerica.com/hams. Hamfest net registration is open to U.S. organizations only.
You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp. Yesterday, my XYL said she'd leave me if I didn't give up ham radio. Over.
Thanks to ICOM for sponsoring the show again tonight. And again, some cool deals out there for ICOM for a couple more months, so make sure you check those out. Visit them at icomamerica.com. Tonight our guest is Bill Brown, WB8ELK. He lives in Huntsville, Alabama, and is the father of high-altitude ballooning. He's launched 500 missions since 1987. Some of those include amateur television, crossband and simplex repeaters, and live camera video downlinks. He was also managing editor of 73 magazine and had a ballooning column in CQ VHF for about a decade, and lately he's been flying a lot of Pico balloons on VHF and HF around the world, and that's what we're going to focus mostly on tonight. So, Bill, thanks for being on the show.
Great to be here, Neil.
Well, we heard from you a little bit on the kind of the general ballooning show that we did with Josh here a few weeks ago. And so why don't you tell us how you got started into ballooning, and then we're going to kind of focus in on the Pico balloons.
Oh, sure. When I first started in ham radio, I was very interested in amateur television and slow scan television. But an amateur television is usually in the UHF portion of the band, so you're basically in line of sight. So antenna height is everything. So I watched a documentary about Joe Kittinger, who parachuted from 102,000 feet with Project Man High back in the 1960s. And at the time, he held the highest parachute jump and actually broke the sound barrier during his descent. And he described this view of the world, seeing the blackness of space during daylight, seeing the curve of the Earth, and it was a view that I wanted to see. However, I wasn't about to go up on a balloon and parachute off from 20 miles above the Earth. So I came up with a little safer version, and that was to take a weather balloon like they use for the Weather Bureau uses for atmospheric sounding. And I observed a couple of their launches, and I says, well, I could put a camera and a transmitter and a video system, and I could actually see the view that Joe Kittinger described. So back in 1987, 31 years ago, I launched my first balloon. which was the first balloon to carry a TV camera at the time in the United States and, in fact, the world. So we went up to about 80 or 90,000 feet, and then subsequent flights, we had a live camera, and you could literally see the curvature of the Earth and the blackness of space during broad daylight, and because you're above 99% of the Earth's atmosphere. So that's how I got started. I've launched 500 balloons since then. One was a 400-pound rocket we launched from the Gulf of Mexico on a balloon that took 33 tanks of helium. And we were going to try and send the rocket into space and back again. It wouldn't go into orbit, but we were going to break the altitude limit for space. And we didn't achieve that, but we did on one of our launches. We did several of those. It was called the Halo Project. Project Halo, and we had live video downlinks coming back from both the gondola and the rocket, and so that's on the mega payload size, 400 pounds and up. And then I decided just a couple of years ago, I witnessed some efforts to actually fly on a party balloon. We're not talking the latex rubber party balloons, but we're talking about a 3-foot diameter mylar foil balloon like they use for happy birthday parties. And one of the students in a science camp I was hosting, I mentioned the fact that, have you ever attached a note to a balloon and let it go and get a response back? And he said he had on one of these mylar balloons and got a response back from a fellow in Canada 400 miles away. And his question to me was, how far and what altitude do you think a balloon like this would go? Just a party balloon. So that prompted me to look into building a payload that was lightweight enough to be launched on, it'd have to be under an ounce to be successful. There were a couple people at times that have actually had done this. Leo Bodnar, M0XER, and Anthony Wynn down in Australia, VK3YT, using one single Qualitex silver foil balloon. And so I decided to jump in the fray. There's probably about a dozen on these ultra lightweight Pico payloads. I decided to make one that was rugged, could be handled by students in classrooms, and yet lightweight enough to fly on one of these balloons. So I came up with the Sky Tracker. It weighs 12 grams, ready to fly. It's totally solar powered. I use flexible power cells on it. They're made by powerfilmsolar.com. The marketing manager actually is a ham, and they often have a booth at the Dayton Hamvention. But they're very rugged. You can have kids play with them, and they aren't going to break. Because when you take them into a classroom, they like to touch the payload and see the experiment. And it's very easy to go into a classroom with one of these systems. It's a great STEM project because all you need is a little small canister of helium and a $3 party balloon and one of my Sky Trackers or equivalent. And you don't have to lug this huge 100-pound tank of helium. And lately the cost of helium has been going sky high, and a big tank of helium is going to cost $150 or more. So I just have 1 cubic foot of helium in these balloons, and they fly in the jet stream and actually can go around the world in about 11 days to 14 days this time of year, if you get the winds just right. So that was my impetus to try and find something that I could take into classrooms to teach students about space and science and ham radio. And the big draw is if you can show a student that they can follow these Pico balloons on their smartphone in real time, that hooks them into ham radio, because you've got to incorporate the smartphones. So we've been one of my first flights. I used a little bit bigger balloon for that one. It's made out of sushi wrap, and a company in California who is also a ham, K6RPT and his son. They have a company called scientificballoonsolutions.com. And they sell about a 3-foot by 7.5-foot plastic tube balloon that's made out of this sushi wrap. And it's a little more expensive than $3, but it can go up to about 42,000 feet and stay there for months and sometimes over a year. My first one I tried with that balloon with my 12-gram board went around the world 6.5 times in 75 days. So now you've got a low Earth orbiting mini satellite on ham radio. And during the winter months, like I say, it can take between 11 days and 20 days to go completely around the world if you are above the weather. I've had students at UC San Diego. They sent one of these up with that same SBS-13 balloon from Scientific Balloon Solutions, and they went around the world 6 times in 90 days. Alan Adamson, W7QO, he's developed his own tracker. He used one of these balloons and went around the world over 30 times, and it stopped transmitting after about 1.5 years. But
oh my
just
goodness.
a month or two ago, it came alive for one transmission over Boulder, Colorado, and it was still alive, but something's gone awry with it after being up there for 2 years. But it was over 2 years in the air, and it's still flying. So it's amazing what can be done with these Pico balloons. Like I say, the experimenters are all over the world. We have several in Europe that are designing payloads, and one in Canada, one in New York, a couple in New York actually, and so we just have a lot of fun introducing students to ham radio this way, and it is an inspiration to them because they have launched their very own ham radio mini satellite.
All right.
It doesn't go into space, but it goes in this and basically right in the jet stream. They learn about the weather patterns too.
Absolutely. That's a great way to teach all those things and let them observe a lot of those weather patterns up there almost into space. Let's talk a little bit about some of the differences here. You have to, have fairly light payloads to start with, and then on the Pico balloons, they've got to be even less. So, what do you do to accommodate the difference? What are you doing to lighten that payload, and do you have to cut back on, an experiment on board while the transmitter's up there? What do you have to do differently?
Well, with a traditional latex weather balloon flight, you're limited to 6 pounds maximum per payload, and a total of 12 pounds. So you have a lot of room for adding batteries and large experiments. However, in the Pico balloon, the real challenge is to make it as light as humanly possible. And when you think you've got it about as light as you can possibly get it, you have to make it lighter. So I had to do things like the thickness of the PC board. I actually used a PC board that's about 1/3 the normal thickness. I found a PC board company in China that would produce these for no extra charge, and that really helped. That cut down a lot of weight. The other thing I did was, instead of a battery on it, it's totally solar powered. There are no batteries at all. That cuts down on the weight because batteries, or even a small lithium polymer battery, is extremely heavy. when you're working with something that weighs 12 grams. The lightest LiPo battery I could find was 4 grams, and I have flown that where it's rechargeable by the solar panels. But the heavier your payload, the lower your float altitude, and you are at greater risk of hitting a storm. So if you're down around 23 to 26,000 feet, your likelihood of hitting weather and getting knocked out of the sky at some point during the flight is much greater than flying at 42,000 feet, where you're above 95% of the storms. So that's your the thing that will cause your mission to fail is usually hitting a thunderstorm or an ice storm or some sort of weather that reaches up into that altitude that you're flying. So this time of year, your biggest threat would be icing up. But if you get above about 29 or 30,000 feet, you are going at least halfway around the world. There was a group that just launched today, in fact, from Pella, Iowa. The call sign on that one is Whiskey Bravo 0, United Radio Whiskey -4. And I'll give you 2 websites that, of course, those of you who have experimented with APRS, APRS.FI is the go-to website for tracking vehicles and planes and balloons. So you would enter WB0URW-4 into the call sign field, and you can see the track of today's flight. Of course, it ended over Indiana. It was launched from Iowa because the sun went down. So we'll have to wait until tomorrow to see where it is. It may actually be too far out in the Atlantic to hit any ground stations because it's 2-meter APRS on that one. The last one they did was WB0URW-3, and if you search for that one, you'll see its last report. Keep in mind it was launched from Pella, Iowa, from a school there. It actually went halfway around the world, and the last report we got from it was over eastern China. And then it headed out in the Pacific Ocean and likely hit some bad storms out there and came down. But it was well on its way around the world. So those are 2 flights that have been very recent, and you can actually search for that. There is another website that is dedicated to high-altitude balloons, both the small Pico balloons and the normal, larger weather balloons. And that is tracker.habhub, and I'll spell that out, Hotel Alpha Bravo, Hotel United Bravo.org. And that one, if you go to that website, you will see all the balloons flying worldwide, both northern and southern hemisphere. And it's a fascinating website to watch as balloons pop up from different places, and you can follow the flights. If it's just going up and then comes right back down, it's normally a regular weather balloon flight. But if it's a flat line in the jet stream, then you'll know it's a Pico balloon, most likely. So those are my 2 go-to flight websites for watching balloon flights, and so that's what I have the classrooms. That when I go into a classroom, we show them those websites so they can track them on their smartphones in real time. The nice thing about APRS is you have ground stations worldwide, so and they all link to the Google map so they can track it. There is, however, something you had to consider when you fly an APRS balloon worldwide. The frequency we use here in the United States for our national APRS network is 144.390 megahertz. That's not the case worldwide. Europe is 144.800. China is 144.64, and Japan is 144.66. And there's a few other frequencies. So what I have to do is design an algorithm in my code. And by the way, the processor I use is the same that's used on the original Arduino boards, for those of you who have programmed an Arduino. It's all written in C using the Arduino developing system, IDE. And so I wrote a friend of mine wrote a geofencing program that I incorporated in that. Mike KD2EAT and Alan W7QO came up with an integer-based version of a geofencing algorithm. So we basically draw a box around the regions where we want the frequency to shift to their national APRS network. And there's also at least three countries that you can't transmit over. I'll give you one of them, Yemen. See if you can figure out what one of the other ones is.
I'm guessing North Korea.
That's right. We don't want to start with World War III. But believe it or not, Great Britain is one of the forbidden countries because they do not allow airborne amateur radio in the United Kingdom. And I don't know the reasoning behind that, but they can't fly ham radio in an airplane, a balloon, or a kite. Anything that flies. Wow. So I have to draw a box around the United Kingdom and make sure my transmitter goes off when it goes across to the United Kingdom as well.
Very interesting. Well, we are overdue for a break here, so we're going to take a break. We'll come back and talk to Bill. We'll give you a chance to call in. We've already got several tweets here with some questions, so we'll take care of as many of those as we can. Maybe we can pick up here on some resources to fly these balloons as well when we come back. So we'll be back with Bill right after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
Thank you for a lovely dinner.
Aren't you going to ask me in to solder some PL259s?
Well, I do have some from Tower Electronics.
How can I refuse?
Consider the sophisticated quality of PL259s from Tower Electronics. From soldering supplies to adapters, connectors to cables, and all types of connectors, Tower Electronics has the parts you're looking for.
Well?
Just one more connector? You know I love your PL259s.
Then by all means, take some with you.
Don't be caught without PL259s. Visit Tower Electronics at a hamfest near you, or visit them online anytime at pl-259.com or call 920-435-2973. They also have ham sticks, mobile antennas, and meters too. See the whole catalog. Go to pl-259.com. Tower Electronics, the ham's dime store since 1978.
Join the conversation. Give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Now, here's more Ham Talk Live.
Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Thanks to Scott and Jill at Tower Electronics for bringing you Ham Talk Live. Been seeing pictures of Scott running around Disney World down there. He's down there ready for Fort Myers, Florida on January 18th and 19th. He'll be at the Ham Fest there. And then I believe Jill will be over at St. Charles, Illinois, on January 19th. And then January 26th, Collinsville, Illinois, and Arcadia, Florida. But you can visit them anytime at pl-259.com. Well, Ham Talk Live is on the air every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time right here at hamtalklive.com. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And it's time for your phone calls now. So if you have a question for Bill, call 920-650-9556. Now, that's a different phone number than usual. It's just for tonight. 812-650-9556. We'll be back to our usual 812-NET-HAM1 number next week. But you can tweet us. We've got several tweets lined up here that we'll get to here momentarily. And if you're listening to the rebroadcast on WTWW or on one of the podcast apps, you're not going to get anybody if you call in. So this show's already happened and it's already in the past. So you'll have to listen to hamtalklive.com if you want to call in live. So nobody's home if you're calling the phone number, not on Thursday night here while we're live on the show. So let me bring Bill back in here, and we've got several questions, but one thing we wanted to get to before the break was some resources. You know, what exactly are you going to need if you want to fly one of these balloons besides just your plain old party balloon?
Well, you could make your own payload up using like an Arduino mini board. You can get a U-Blocks board from UPU Tronics in Great Britain, and but you'd have to come up with a little transmitter board as well. I went ahead and developed it as an all-in-one package ready to fly. And so if anybody's interested in, I make these available to those who want to fly Pico balloons without having to design their own. You can email me at Whiskey Bravo 8 Echo Lima Kilo. That's WB8ELK@gmail.com, and I'll give you the particulars on that. As far as other resources go, the Mylar balloons, you have to buy a Qualitex brand, Balloons Direct, or balloonsfast.com. You want to search for a 36-inch round silver Mylar balloon. Helium. I use those party time tanks, balloon time tanks you can get at the dollar store or Walmart. But keep in mind, if you do so, they're 80% pure helium, so you will fly a couple thousand feet lower than if you used pure helium. And you can actually fly hydrogen in these, and you'll go about 3,000 feet higher, and they will last longer. I actually am able to get a small tank of helium or hydrogen, about a 40 cubic foot tank, cost about $20 or $30 from a welding supply store, and they're very lightweight. A single person can carry them around. You want to have a way of regulating that with a party balloon filler and a hose, and to fill up your party balloon, however. And then the scientificballoonsolutions.com is another resource for the larger balloons. But they're a lot more expensive than $3 a piece for the Mylar balloons. Other resources, like I say, you could go into a grocery store or a Dollar General store, and you could have them fill up your Mylar party balloon. And I think my local store here would do it for $1 or $2. And that's usually pure helium or good quality helium at these stores. Some aren't, some are, but I know the one here turned out to be about 99% pure. And that's one way of doing it, because these balloons are small enough to carry in a car. Don't carry them in your car if you're running hydrogen, however.
Yeah, that may be a
but I use fishing line for the support mechanism to attach it to the balloon, and I use Kapton tape. That's a great tape to use because it handles the environment very well. And I put all the string and everything into the packages I mail out, and then all you have to do is buy a $3 balloon and find heliums from somewhere, and that's what I would recommend. There are online resources that tell you where your balloon is going to fly. There's a NOAA HySplit. It's HYSPLIT, and they have a balloon trajectory program that will estimate where your balloon will fly, so you get an idea of what the jet stream is doing. And,
All right. We've got a call here, and we've got several tweets and stuff. So I just want to let him know we're here. You got anything else you need to throw in on that list real quick?
No, I'll stand by for the call.
Okay, let's take our live caller here since we've got the new phone system. We're testing it out. I told Bill he was going to be the guinea pig tonight. So who do we have on the phone line here?
This is Mark, N4BCD, Neil.
Hi, Mark. Good to hear from you down in Huntsville. What's going on tonight?
Well, I just wanted to wish you and Bill a Happy New Year. Bill, I knew you were going to be on the program. I keep track of these things. But, I've been fortunate to Bill's a local ham here in the Huntsville area, and I've known him for a number of years. I've seen his program here in Huntsville and in Dayton. Bill, could you describe to the listeners the weight lift testing you do prior to a launch to ensure that these Mylar balloons successfully reach altitude and not go too high and not sink?
Oh, that's an excellent question, Mark. And by the way, Mark and I share a last name, but we're not related. The way I test them is through a lot of trial and error and dumping a lot of these in the Atlantic Ocean and scattered across the Southeast. I've done about 50 test flights. I've optimized the lift to anywhere between 2.5 grams to 4 grams on the neck of the balloon. That's positive lift above the weight of your payload. And the way I test that is a nickel weighs 5 grams and a penny weighs 2.5 grams. So if it just barely lifts a penny and a nickel causes it to go down, then I know I'm near the right lift. But I usually create a little baggie with a clip with the right amount of weight, which is the payload weight plus 3 grams. 3 grams is optimum. And I attach that to the neck of the balloon, and when that is neutrally buoyant, it's not going up or down with that baggie attached, I know I've got the weight of the payload plus 3 grams, and I found that is the optimum lift to prevent it from bursting when it goes to altitude and to allow it to float instead. That was a great question, Mark.
It's a great thing to see in person, guys. And Bill, are you going to Dayton again?
Oh yes, we're going to have a balloon sat forum on Friday, and we're going to have a Pico balloon race with 3 Pico balloons. So all are welcome if you can attend the Dayton Hamvention.
I can attest to your listeners too. It's well worth seeing because Bill's on a really excellent topic here, and I can't imagine anybody that knows more about the subject. And looking forward to seeing you up there, Bill. And Neil, thanks for having me on the show tonight. We'll talk soon about the Huntsville Hamfest, okay?
All right, Mark. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. And 7-3.
Okay. Happy New Year. Bye-bye.
All right. Happy New Year. 812-650-9556 is tonight's phone number. It's not our usual one, but we've got that. Let's start knocking out some of these messages here. First of all, Hank is on Spreaker, W4HTB, says, how many trackers do you think have been launched to date? And when are you going to produce a YouTube video instruction?
That's a good question. As far as Pico balloons launched, there's probably been, I would guess, over 100 of them worldwide by different people. So I've personally done about 40 launches myself, Pico balloons. And I'm working on that YouTube video, instructional video.
All right, very good. Well, let's see here. I'll make sure everything's working here. Blake in for BWR wants to know, what's the ascent rate on a Mylar Pico balloon with the Sky Tracker?
Good question. To achieve success, you want to be right around 1 meter per second or less ascent rate. If you're under 1 meter per second, which is approximately 200 feet per minute or less, then you are likely to have success at floating a Pico balloon. If you go much over that, the balloon will likely overpressure and pop when it gets to altitude. because you'll have a little bit too much excess gas in it, and that will pop the seams or cause it to burst. But that's a good question.
All right, let me get to another question here. KC5FM says, "Is it helium hard to get? Is it expensive?" I think you answered some of that, but we can address that real quickly.
Yes, it depends where you get it from. The major companies are sometimes restrict helium sales to existing customers or large customers, and they won't even sell it to private individuals. Or they will jack the rate of the cost of the helium tank to $150, $200 or more. Right now, I think it's right around $150 for a large tank. And like I say, I get these smaller tanks for about $20 or $30, which a 40 cubic foot tank is all you need to do a number of these Pico balloon flights. And once again, it's very easy to lift by one person. So it's not so hard to get in small quantities, but the larger tanks are harder to get. A lot of amateur radio balloon groups are going to hydrogen because a big tank of hydrogen is $55 or less. And as long as you follow precautions not to create sparks, it's perfectly safe.
All right. And then Josh, W3ARD, who was on our balloon show a few weeks ago, has a couple of questions here. Are there any issues with a U.S.-issued ham radio license IDing all over the globe? Do you have to have a different license? And then we'll follow up with another one here.
It depends on the countries you're flying over. We have reciprocal agreements with many European nations. But if there is a question, that's where the geofencing algorithm can come in to eliminate transmissions above that country. I haven't had any issues or complaints with flights that we've done. But generally, it hasn't been an issue to date.
Okay, and then Josh's other question, any issues with uncontrolled balloons drifting over non-friendly countries like Libya or North Korea?
Once again, when I'm over an unfriendly country such as that, I do not transmit, and the chances of them actually detecting that balloon are probably pretty slim. Most radar systems filter out anything that's slow moving or not behaving like an aircraft. So although some of these Pico balloons in the jet stream I have observed going 200 miles per hour just floating along the jet stream.
Next question is from Jim, K5ND from K2BSA. We plan to work with Bill to launch 3 Pico balloons at the World Scout Jamboree in West Virginia in July. And it'll have APRS and Whisper. And he wants to know if you could talk a little bit about Whisper.
Yes, I have a version that transmits on the Whisper mode. And instead of guitar string for the antenna wires, which is what I use for the 2-meter version, I use 36 gauge magnet wire and fishing line. And it's 17 feet 1 inch up and 17 feet inch down. So it's a little trickier to launch. But the advantage is on Whisper mode, you can send a very low power transmitter and be received worldwide. And it has a distributed network of ground stations that filter into whispernet.org. So I've actually had a balloon over the middle of the Atlantic, and the telemetry was received on the opposite side of the world in Perth, Australia, with 25 milliwatts of power. That's the beauty of Whisper mode. However, Whisper has a drawback in that you can't, it's very limited in the amount of telemetry information you can send. It's basically a call sign, 4-digit grid, and a power level. So I send 2 transmissions. One has the call sign and the grid square, and I use the power level for a course altitude. And then I send a second transmission that begins with a 0, 1, or Q, which are invalid call signs. But since it's right after my transmission on the same frequency, it's technically IDing every 10 minutes. So I embed the telemetry in that call sign, and that includes the fifth and sixth digit grid square, and then a fine altitude for the power level. And that way, I have a Python script that grabs both frames from WhisperNet's WhisperNet.org's database, converts it to APRS, sends it to an APRS server, and it shows up. If you ever see an APRS balloon over the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic, that's how it's being done. It's a little Python script is grabbing the Whisper data. We just had one that the balloon failed. It was launched from a high school in San Diego, W6SUN-5, and you'll still see it if you look for Whiskey 6 Sun-5. It was laying in the Mojave Desert. The wires were on the ground in the sand, and it was being received every day from 1,000 miles away in Texas and Oregon and San Francisco, and telling us within a 3 by 5 mile range where it was. Several expeditions went in the sand to try and find it, and finally Mark, W6MAF, drove his Jeep until he got a very strong 20-meter signal, saw the balloon, started reeling in the magnet wire, and much to his horror, he discovered that the payload was sitting underneath his tire.
Oh, no.
But fortunately, it was just on the solar panel, so he just slightly damaged the solar panel. If he'd been over 6 inches, he would have completely destroyed the tracker. But he said the signal was very, very strong at that point.
I imagine so. Oh, my goodness.
So he found a
that's
very
pretty cool.
small needle in a very large haystack in the Mojave Desert.
Oh, my. Well, we've got a couple more here from Lloyd KC5FM, and I think you answered the first one already about how heavy the Pico balloon load can be. But he says, regarding payload retrieval, what's your record distance for the return, and how many missions get retrieved, and how many are lost in the haystack?
Well, I have one that's sitting in a tree in the Ivory Coast of Africa. If you want to go out after it, I'll give you the coordinates. It was knocked down by a thunderstorm after going around 6.5 times around the world. We had one that landed in a cornfield in Illinois, and Mark, KA9SZX, went out and he DF'd it with signal strength because he didn't have an APRS receiver. And he was able to find it out in the middle of a field, and that was launched from, that was launched in that area. But the farthest, I'll tell you a story about a latex floater. You can float a latex weather balloon as long as your payload's under 2.5 pounds and you go up under 200 feet per minute. It will float for about 50 hours or so or less. Then finally the UV degrades the latex rubber. But K6RPT launched one from San Jose, stayed up 50 hours. It landed in Morocco. A friend of his who lived in Casablanca drove out there with 2 of his friends that could speak the language. They asked the date farm near where they saw the last reading if anybody had seen it. They did. They found 2 date farm workers that had found it, and they spent a couple hours negotiating a price to get it back, because in that country, possession is 100% of ownership. But they were able to negotiate a fee, and they got the payload back after flying from San Francisco area to Morocco.
Very interesting. Well, it looks like we are just a little overtime, actually, so we probably should wrap things up here, Bill. But if you have any last comments and website where people can check out some of your stuff, why don't we do that, and then we're going to close it down for tonight.
Yes, you can contact me, and I can send you some links. for Pico ballooning and regular ballooning, and send out some information and resources. My email is Whiskey Bravo 8 Echo Lima Kilo. That's WB8ELK at gmail.com. Or you can look at my website on WB8ELK.com. Thank you for having me tonight.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on and giving us some more information about these Pico balloons. That's one of the newer things happening with the balloon flight, so it was good to hear about that. That is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. Thanks to my guest, Bill Brown, WB8ELK, and everybody out there in cyberspace for listening and calling in, and invite you back next Thursday night, and we'll be back at our regular phone number at 9 p.m. Eastern Time when Victor and Dorsoff, VA2WA, Randy Thompson, K5ZD, and Bruce Horn, WA7B&M, will be here to talk about live online contest scoring. And for a list of all of our upcoming guests, visit hamtalklive.com. And if you like Ham Talk Live, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen. It helps others find us faster. And again, thanks to people listening to the replay on WTWW 5085 on Saturday nights. That's new. So thank you to Ted and the gang for getting that set up. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.